Good evening. Tonight we're diving into a subject that's as infuriating as it is depressingly common, powerful politicians who, despite being embroiled in scandals that would end anyone else's career, or frankly land them in a small room with a metal toilet, somehow manage to just carry on. It's the political equivalent of a cat with 9 lives, except the cat is wearing an expensive suit, has access to nuclear codes, and has just been credibly accused of something truly awful. These are the figures who treat laws like suggestions and consequences, like a mild inconvenience, a pesky fly to be swatted away with a phalanx of high-priced lawyers. They are the masters of the non-apology apology, the champions of deflection, and the grand wizards of whataboutism. They operate on a different plane of existence, one where accountability is a foreign concept, like trying to explain TikTok to a Victorian ghost. They don't just slip through the cracks, they seem to actively reshape the cracks around them, turning gaping chasms of legal and ethical breaches into mere hairline fractures that their careers can comfortably stride over without even breaking a sweat. It's a spectacle of impunity that leaves the rest of us staring slack-jawed at our television screens. So the question that hangs over all of this, the one that keeps us up at night, is this: when the people in charge of the rules are the ones breaking them, who, if anyone, is actually holding them to account? Is the entire system just an elaborate stage play designed to give us the illusion of justice while the main actors do whatever they want backstage? Let's take a look at some of the most egregious examples of political escapology. It's going to be a bumpy and, frankly, a rather rage-inducing ride. Let's start with a quintessential example, the poster boy for getting away with it, Richard Milhous Nixon. Yes, Tricky Dick. A nickname so fitting it's like calling a great white shark Bitey. Nixon's presidency is, of course, synonymous with one word, Watergate, a scandal so iconic it's become the suffix for every political scandal since. We've had Partygate, Bridgegate, Emailgate. It's the gateway drug to political ruin, and Nixon was the original dealer. The whole affair began with a third-rate burglary, as his press secretary called it, at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. But it wasn't just a simple break-in. It was the unraveling thread that exposed a vast tapestry of political espionage, illegal wiretapping, slush funds, and a cover-up orchestrated from the highest office in the land. This wasn't just bending the rules, this was taking the rule book, shredding it, and using the confetti to celebrate a re-election. The sheer audacity is something to behold. As the evidence mounted, thanks to the tireless work of journalists and investigators, the walls began to close in. The Supreme Court demanded he hand over the infamous White House tapes, which contained the smoking gun conversation proving his involvement in the cover-up. Facing certain impeachment and removal from office, Nixon did something unprecedented. He resigned. He flew off in a helicopter, flashing that awkward victory sign, leaving a nation in turmoil. He was the only president to ever resign. But here's the kicker, the part that truly cements his place in the Hall of Fame of consequence dodging. His successor, Gerald Ford, issued him a full, free and absolute pardon. Just like that, no trial, no conviction, no accountability. Ford claimed it was to heal the nation, but for many it felt like the ultimate old boys club maneuver. It sent a clear message: if you're powerful enough, the law is merely a suggestion, and justice is something that happens to other, less important people. Nixon spent the rest of his life writing books, acting as an elder statesman, and trying to rehabilitate his image. He never faced a single legal consequence for his actions. He didn't just slip through the cracks. He was handed a golden parachute and a get-out-of-jail-free card, all while the country was left to grapple with a profound crisis of faith in its own government. It was, and remains, a masterclass in escaping justice. If Richard Nixon wrote the American playbook on political survival, then Silvio Berlusconi took that book, translated it into Italian, added a lot more glamour, bunga parties, and somehow made it even more effective. For decades, Berlusconi dominated Italian politics, not just as a leader, but as a phenomenon. He was a media tycoon, a football club owner, and a 3-time prime minister who seemed to collect criminal charges the way other people collect stamps. His list of legal troubles is genuinely staggering. We're talking allegations of embezzlement, tax fraud, false accounting, bribery of judges, and, most famously, paying for sex with an underage prostitute. Any one of these would be a career-ending, life-destroying catastrophe for a normal person. For Berlusconi, it was just another Tuesday. He treated the Italian judicial system like a personal adversary, a pesky rival football team that he could outmaneuver with a combination of wealth, power, and sheer, unadulterated nerve. How did he do it? Well, being a media mogul certainly helped. He controlled a significant portion of Italy's television channels, allowing him to shape the narrative and portray himself as a victim of a politically motivated witch hunt by communist magistrates. He was the ultimate populist showman, charming and cracking jokes on air while his lawyers worked tirelessly behind the scenes, exploiting every loophole and delay tactic known to man. He was the political equivalent of a magician constantly yelling, "Look over there," while sawing democracy in half. Furthermore, while in power, he and his allies passed laws that seemed tailor-made to protect him from prosecution. These were often called ad personam laws, laws for one person. He literally changed the rules of the game while he was playing it. It's like being in a chess match, and just as you're about to say checkmate, your opponent declares that, actually, his king can now fly and shoot lasers. It's not just cheating, it's a fundamental breakdown of the entire system. Eventually, in 2013, he was convicted of tax fraud, leading to his expulsion from the Senate. But even then, it felt less like a final defeat and more like a temporary setback. He continued to lead his political party, pull strings from the sidelines, and even made a comeback to the European Parliament. Berlusconi's career is a testament to the idea that if you have enough money, enough media influence, and enough shamelessness, you can survive almost anything, leaving a trail of scandals behind you like the wake of a very expensive and legally dubious yacht. Now we move from the theatrics of Italian politics to the chilling efficiency of the Kremlin and its long-reigning master, Vladimir Putin. If Berlusconi treated the law like a game, Putin treats it like an irrelevance. For over 2 decades, he has cultivated an image of absolute strength and control, presiding over a system where accountability is not just absent, it's actively suppressed. The concept of Putin slipping through the cracks is almost quaint. It implies there are cracks to begin with. He is the wall. The list of allegations that have swirled around Putin and his inner circle is long and deeply disturbing. It includes everything from vast, unexplained personal wealth and corruption on an epic scale, as detailed by opposition figures like the late Alexei Navalny, to the poisoning of political opponents on foreign soil with nerve agents. These are not just political scandals, they are acts that seem ripped from the pages of a Cold War spy novel, except they are happening in the 21st century. And what are the consequences? Domestically, there are none. The Russian media is largely state-controlled, painting Putin not as a corrupt autocrat but as the strong father of the nation, protecting Russia from a hostile West. Political opposition is systematically dismantled, with critics jailed, exiled, or worse. The judicial system is widely seen as an instrument of the state, not an independent check on its power. Asking for accountability from Putin inside Russia is like asking a bear for a hug. It's a fundamentally misguided request that will likely end very badly for you. Internationally, the response has often been a frustrating cycle of condemnation, sanctions, and then a slow return to business as usual. Allegations of election interference in other countries, the annexation of Crimea, and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine have all been met with outrage, but Putin has remained firmly in power, seemingly immune to external pressure. He has mastered the art of geopolitical chess, exploiting divisions among his adversaries and betting that their outrage has a shorter shelf life than his resolve. The story of Vladimir Putin is the ultimate example of what happens when power becomes so concentrated that it exists beyond any meaningful check or balance. He isn't just a politician who has avoided consequences, he has constructed an entire reality where he is the one who defines what consequences are. It's a sobering and frankly terrifying look at a system where the cracks have been completely and utterly sealed shut, with him on the inside in total control. Let's travel south to the Republic of South Africa and discuss a man whose ability to deflect scandal earned him the nickname the Teflon President Jacob Zuma. His presidency, which lasted from 2009 to 2018, was, honestly, a masterclass in political survival, a 9-year-long tightrope walk over a chasm of corruption allegations, legal challenges and public outrage. Zuma didn't just slip through the cracks, he seemed to dance in them, singing his signature song, "Bring Me My Machine Gun." The primary scandal that really defined his career is the epic saga of the arms deal, a controversial government weapons procurement program from the late 1990s. Zuma was accused of accepting bribes from a French arms company in connection with the deal. This led to a staggering 783 counts of corruption, fraud, racketeering and money laundering. These charges hung over him for years, a legal storm cloud that would have drowned any other politician. But not Zuma. He and his legal team employed what became known as the Stalingrad strategy, fighting every single charge, every procedural step in like every court possible. They launched appeal after appeal, challenge after challenge, delaying the process for well over a decade. It was a war of attrition against the justice system, designed to exhaust his opponents and just wait out the clock. All the while he maintained his innocence, framing the prosecution as a political conspiracy by his rivals within the ruling African National Congress, or ANC. Then there was the Nkandla scandal, where millions of dollars in state funds were used for security upgrades to his private rural homestead. These upgrades famously included a swimming pool, which the government hilariously tried to defend as a fire pool, a cattle kraal, and an amphitheater. The image of a president using public money for lavish personal upgrades while millions of his citizens lived in poverty caused a massive public outcry. Yet for years, he resisted calls to pay back the money. Even after being forced out of the presidency in 2018 by his own party, the ANC, Zuma's story of evading consequences didn't end. He was sentenced to prison for contempt of court after refusing to testify at an inquiry into state capture, but was released on medical parole after just 2 months. His imprisonment sparked riots, showcasing his continued influence. Jacob Zuma's career is a powerful and honestly deeply frustrating case study in how a charismatic leader with a loyal following can manipulate a political system and defy accountability time and time again. Now to Israel, and a leader who has dominated its political landscape for longer than anyone else, Benjamin "Bibi" Netanyahu. If politics is the art of the possible, Netanyahu has, well, redefined it as the art of the perpetual. He's Israel's longest-serving prime minister, a political survivor of the highest order, whose career has been marked by a relentless series of comebacks, often while simultaneously fending off serious legal challenges that would have ended other careers. For years, Netanyahu has been embroiled in a series of corruption investigations, collectively known as Case 1000, 2000 and 4000. These aren't just vague accusations, they're formal indictments for bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Case 1000 involves allegations that he and his wife received lavish gifts, like expensive cigars and pink champagne, from wealthy benefactors in exchange for favors. It sounds like the shopping list for a villain in a Bond movie, not the conduct of a head of state. Case 2000 is even more insidious, alleging that Netanyahu tried to strike a deal with a newspaper publisher for more favorable coverage in exchange for kneecapping a rival newspaper. And Case 4000, considered the most serious, accuses him of promoting regulations worth hundreds of millions of dollars to a telecom giant in exchange for positive coverage on its news website. This goes to the very heart of the relationship between power, money, and the media. Throughout this entire multi-year ordeal, Netanyahu has deployed a familiar but effective strategy. He has consistently denied all wrongdoing, attacking the investigations as a witch hunt orchestrated by a biased media, a leftist elite, and a politicized legal system. He hasn't just pleaded innocent. He's gone on the offensive, attempting to delegitimize the very institutions tasked with holding him accountable. It's a high-stakes gamble to convince the public that the system is broken, not the leader. The incredible thing is that for a long time it worked. He has continued to win elections and form governments even after being formally indicted, a situation almost unheard of in a modern democracy. He has masterfully fused his personal legal battles with his political identity, arguing that a vote for him is a vote against the deep state. His career demonstrates a remarkable and honestly, deeply concerning ability to maintain power and leadership. not just in spite of, but maybe even because of, his fight against the justice system. Let's rewind the clock and travel to the Philippines to look at a case of authoritarianism and corruption so vast, it's almost cartoonish in its scale. The rule of Ferdinand Marcos. This isn't just a story of slipping through the cracks of justice. It's a story of blowing a hole in the national treasury so large you could fly a fleet of private jets through it, which, incidentally, is the kind of thing the Marcos family allegedly enjoyed doing. Marcos ruled the Philippines for 21 years, nearly 14 of which were under a brutal period of martial law. During this time, political opposition was crushed, thousands were detained, tortured or killed, and press freedom was extinguished. He wasn't just an autocrat, he was the architect of a system designed to perpetuate his power and, crucially, to facilitate the systematic looting of his own country. This was kleptocracy on a world historical scale. Estimates suggest that Marcos and his cronies embezzled somewhere between $5 and $10 billion from the Philippine treasury. To put that in perspective, that's billions of dollars in the 1970s and 80s. The sheer extravagance was legendary, epitomized by his wife Imelda Marcos and her infamous collection of over 3,000 pairs of shoes. The shoes became a symbol, a ridiculous leather-bound testament to a regime that valued luxury for the few over the basic needs of the many. The regime finally crumbled in 1986 in the face of the People Power Revolution, a massive, non-violent uprising that forced the Marcos family to flee the country. They were airlifted by the United States to a comfortable exile in Hawaii. And here is the great, frustrating injustice of it all. Despite the mountain of evidence of human rights abuses and gargantuan theft, Ferdinand Marcos was never successfully prosecuted. He never spent a day in court for his crimes against the Filipino people. He died in exile in 1989, having escaped any and all legal consequences for his two-decade reign of terror and plunder. While governments have spent decades trying to recover the stolen wealth, the man himself got away completely. The story of Ferdinand Marcos is a chilling reminder that you can brutalize and rob an entire nation, and if you play your cards right, you can simply fly away, leaving justice as just one more thing you managed to steal from your people. Staying in the realm of strongman politics, let's head to Peru and the deeply controversial figure of Alberto Fujimori. His story is a particularly dizzying one, a rollercoaster of authoritarian rule, human rights abuses, a dramatic escape, a surprising return, conviction, and then a pardon. It's a journey that treats the concept of final justice less like a destination and more like a temporary stop on a much longer, more chaotic tour. Fujimori came to power in 1990 as an outsider, promising to tackle hyperinflation and the violent Shining Path insurgency. And to be fair, he did have some success on both fronts, but his methods were, to put it mildly, extreme. In 1992, he staged a so-called self-coup, dissolving Congress and the judiciary and assuming full dictatorial powers. He then oversaw a brutal counterinsurgency campaign marred by serious human rights violations, including forced sterilizations and massacres carried out by government death squads. His government was also fantastically corrupt, with his intelligence chief, Vladimiro Montesinos, acting as the puppet master behind a vast network of bribery and extortion. When the regime began to collapse in 2000 amidst scandal, Fujimori did something truly audacious. While attending a summit in Brunei, he faxed his resignation from a hotel in Japan, the land of his ancestors, and claimed Japanese citizenship, which protected him from extradition. He literally faxed in his escape plan. For years he lived freely in Japan. But in a bizarre twist, he flew to Chile in 2005, where he was arrested and eventually extradited back to Peru to finally face the music. In 2009, he was convicted of human rights abuses and sentenced to 25 years in prison. It seemed for a moment that justice had finally caught up. But this is the world of consequence-dodging politicians, so of course the story doesn't end there. In 2017, he was granted a controversial humanitarian pardon by then-President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, a move widely seen as a political deal to avoid impeachment. The pardon was later overturned, then reinstated, then overturned again by international courts, then reinstated again by Peru's top court, which finally led to his release in 2023. Fujimori's case is a whiplash-inducing saga that asks a troubling question. What does a conviction even mean if the prison door is a revolving one, subject to the political winds of the day? Let's turn our attention to Pakistan, a country with a notoriously turbulent political history and a man who has been at its center for decades, Nawaz Sharif. His career is not so much a straight line as it is a series of dramatic peaks and valleys. He's been Prime Minister 3 separate times, and each tenure has been cut short by scandal, corruption charges, or a military coup. Yet, like a political boomerang, he just keeps coming back. Sharif's political journey is deeply intertwined with allegations of corruption. The most famous of these exploded onto the scene with the Panama Papers leak in 2016. The documents revealed that his children owned luxury apartments in London through offshore companies, properties that the family's declared wealth couldn't possibly account for. This wasn't just a minor discrepancy, it was a glaring red flag pointing towards hidden illicit riches. The scandal gripped Pakistan and led to a massive investigation. The fallout was immense. Pakistan's Supreme Court, in a landmark ruling, disqualified him from holding public office for life and ordered a criminal trial. He was eventually convicted of corruption and sentenced to prison. It was a stunning fall from grace for one of the country's most powerful men. He was forced into exile in London, seemingly for good this time. His political career appeared to be definitively over, another powerful figure finally brought to justice. But in the world of Pakistani politics, definitively over is a very flexible term. After a few years in London, as the political tides shifted back home and his rivals fell out of favour, the path for his return began to clear. His lifetime ban from politics was conveniently overturned by the courts. His convictions were suspended, and in late 2023 he made a triumphant return to Pakistan, greeted by massive crowds of supporters, ready to contest elections once again. The story of Nawaz Sharif is a perfect illustration of how, in certain political systems, justice can be temporary and contingent on who holds power. Convictions can be overturned, exiles can end, and a politician declared corrupt and unfit for office can be welcomed back as a national leader just a few years later. He didn't just slip through the cracks, he waited for the political landscape to shift, and for the cracks to conveniently reform into a red carpet welcoming him home. And now to the United Kingdom, and a politician who treated scandals with the same blustering disregard that a bull treats a china shop, Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson. Yes, that's his real name. Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister was a whirlwind of controversy, a chaotic symphony of gaffes, U-turns and scandals that would have ended the careers of a dozen more conventional politicians. But Boris wasn't conventional. He was a master of political jiu-jitsu, using his own perceived flaws as a kind of armor. His premiership will forever be defined by Partygate, a scandal that was as absurd as it was infuriating. While the entire country was under strict COVID-19 lockdown rules, unable to visit dying relatives or attend funerals, it emerged that number 10 Downing Street was hosting a series of boozy parties, complete with suitcases of wine and a DJ. The sheer hypocrisy was breathtaking. It was a let-them-eat-cake moment, but with more lukewarm white wine and less cake. Johnson's response was a masterclass in obfuscation. First, he denied there were any parties, then he admitted he was there but didn't know it was a party. He expressed regret, offered apologies that were carefully worded to avoid admitting any real wrongdoing, and insisted it was time to move on. He survived a confidence vote within his own party and clung to power, seemingly immune to the public fury. His strategy was to create so much noise and chaos that any single scandal would simply get lost in the storm. This was just one of many controversies. There was the scandal over who paid for the lavish refurbishment of his Downing Street flat, complete with gold wallpaper. There were accusations of cronyism in awarding COVID contracts. And finally, the scandal that brought him down was his handling of allegations against a fellow MP, where it became clear he had not been truthful about what he knew and when. It wasn't one single crack he slipped through, it was a whole network of them that he navigated with a shrug and a well-timed classical allusion. Even after being forced to resign, he remained a prominent and disruptive figure in British politics. He was found by a parliamentary committee to have deliberately misled Parliament over Partygate, a cardinal sin in the Westminster system. Yet he remains a popular figure, with a significant portion of the electorate, a columnist, and a constant thorn in the side of his successor. Boris Johnson proved that, with enough charisma and a complete lack of shame, you can treat the rules of political gravity as entirely optional. Finally, we come back to the United States and a figure who has shattered political norms like no other, Donald J. Trump. His presidency and post-presidency have been a relentless four-dimensional stress test on the institutions of American democracy. If Richard Nixon slipped through the cracks, Donald Trump seems to have arrived with a jackhammer, actively working to make the cracks wider, deeper, and more numerous for his own benefit. Trump is the only president in United States history to be impeached twice. The first time was for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, related to his pressuring of Ukraine to investigate a political rival. The second time was for incitement of insurrection, following the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. In both instances, he was acquitted by the Senate, with his party largely standing by him. The impeachment process, designed as the ultimate check on presidential power, proved to be a partisan brick wall. Beyond the impeachments, his career is a veritable blizzard of investigations, lawsuits, and allegations. These range from his business dealings before he was president, to his handling of classified documents after he left the White House, to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. He faces multiple criminal indictments, a situation that is completely unprecedented for a former United States president, let alone one who is actively running for the office again. His strategy for dealing with this onslaught is a turbocharged version of what we've seen from others. He relentlessly attacks the justice system, the FBI, the media, and any judge or prosecutor involved in his cases, framing it all as a vast, coordinated witch hunt by his political enemies. He doesn't just deny wrongdoing, he claims victimhood, positioning himself as a martyr fighting on behalf of his supporters against a corrupt deep state. This approach has been remarkably effective at solidifying his base and maintaining his grip on the Republican Party. He has turned his legal perils into a political rallying cry, a fundraising tool, and a badge of honor. The normal rules of political accountability simply do not seem to apply. Donald Trump's story is the ultimate ongoing experiment in whether a politician can survive and even thrive, not just by slipping through the cracks, but by convincing millions of people that the cracks themselves are the real problem. So, after that tour through the Hall of Fame of political escapology, from Nixon's pardon to Trump's impeachments, from Berlusconi's bunga parties to Marcos's stolen billions, we are left with a deeply unsettling feeling. We've seen leaders who treat laws as minor obstacles, investigations as political theater, and consequences as something that happens to other people. They wrap themselves in the flag, claim victimhood, and attack the very institutions designed to ensure a level playing field. It's a playbook that seems to work time and time again. This brings us back to that fundamental and frankly terrifying question. Is true justice in its purest form a luxury that only the powerless can be forced to afford? When you have enough money, enough media influence, a loyal base of supporters, and a complete and utter absence of shame, can you simply redefine reality? Can you construct a world where you are permanently immune, where the rules that bind the rest of society simply float away like a forgotten promise? The evidence we've seen tonight is, to put it mildly, not encouraging. The list of figures who seem to operate in this consequence-free zone is long and ever-growing. And that's where I want to turn it over to you. We've only scratched the surface tonight. Who did we miss? Which political leader from your country or another do you think is the ultimate master of slipping through the cracks and avoiding accountability? Let us know your picks in the comments below. Let's continue this vital, if infuriating, conversation. Thank you for watching.